you were going to start content creation business in 2023 right now and money was no object to you, what are some of the things that you would stress on, and what are some of the things that you would definitely implement on the front end?
I think in reality, what people do is when they come in and they do have a limited budget, they spend on what's fun and what's sexy right out the gate rather than what would actually propel them forward.
It's so refreshing when we get people that they're just getting their stuff going and they're seeking out help from professionals on the front end, not years and years later when it's like, hey, I've screwed up. Garrett, what's up, dude? How are you?
I'm good. Busy. Today's been busy. We started the day off with a meeting. My head's clipped. I'm not clipped. I had to zoom up or scroll up. Laster. Oh, what's up, Laster?
Yo.
There it is. J-Man. What's good, J-Man? No, today's been good. It's been busy. We had, dude, it's still growing pains because we had a client book. Literally, you and I were talking business last night. We sent out some invites last night, just doing what we normally do. We're in Discord talking, you're playing Apex and I'm just working on work stuff and like just chatting, like the normal thing. And I feel like we're always working. We send out invites to clients to book and do this stuff. And sure enough, one booked like for this morning, like right away. And it was like, even as long as we've been doing this now, something hits us like, oh, that's something we should fix. Like there's so many minor things over time that
right.
Even as we do this, it's like, okay, we got to fix it so that a client can't book literally like the very next morning when we know it's a content day or something like that. It's just as easy as blocking our calendar off. But we've been doing this alone. You and I are both very diligent in blocking our calendars because we have to be, and we still find ourselves running into these issues. So, I mean, that should be kind of something to look forward to. But
I think we're definitely still experiencing growing pains, which is kind of what you're talking about a little bit is, I think through last year, we had a lot of different stuff come up that we basically fixed and sorted out. But I think through this year, we're still running into things that we can be better on. And that's part of what we've realized, like, honestly, in the past month. We were very confident after beginning of year and a lot of the growth we experienced. And I think, I wouldn't say it got to us, or got to our head or anything like that from an ego way, more so of we maybe thought we were a little bit better off and doing better than we were. And now our eyes have been opened very recently to a lot of the ways we can still improve. And that's been good.
It just never stops. Like even when you've hit a certain point, a certain level of success, it doesn't matter. Like you got to keep going because now the expectations, like, and we're used to this too. I mean, we have to deliver on a product, especially when we've
a little bit.
Which way?
You're that way.
That way?
Yeah, you were more in frame than I was.
Oh, okay. We don't want me in frame.
No, we just want to be equal. We're good.
But it's just difficult. I mean, you have to accept the fact that, small business, and as you gain a little bit of success, not that like we haven't made it by any means. We're still constantly like grinding. I tweeted the other day, like we're grinding like the renters do, like we're still always on it. But even after tax season, you kind of slow down intentionally. Like, I mean, we had such a good tax season, you almost kind of burn out. You really can't afford to stop for too long. Like you just got to keep going if you want to be successful. Now you can stop and you can just take a break and understand your business will take a little bit of a hit. Like that's okay. But as long as we're offering services to people, we can't afford to do that.
Well, and I was listening to a podcast this week that was talking about how you're never, and everybody knows this, but actually implementing it, it's like you're never stagnant. You're either going forward or you're going backwards. And that's something what I think with like steady businesses that have been around the scene for a long time, or maybe different industries too, their consistency looks different than a new business consistency. Yeah. And I think for a new business, only being a couple years old like we are, consistency for us is grinding all the time. Because if we stop for even 1 month, whether that's pushing content, whether that's talking to clients, it could be anything, we're going backwards because now we're unfulfilling services, or we're not talking to new clients, potential prospects, and growing. And when we have a small team and we have a small client base, we can't really afford that. So I definitely think we've had a wake up call in this past week. Me and you've been talking a lot about just like different ways we can improve, which I like. I think sometimes you kind of need to snap back into it, and just realize that no one owes you anything, and you got to show your value every single day.
Yeah, and putting basically saying you will feel it 3 months later. That's exactly right. Is we have all these successful things and stuff, and in May, when we actually slowed down, we started feeling it here in like late June. I mean, we're mid-July now, which is really hard to think about. But also, I mean, you got to put it in context. For me and you to feel it is really like we're not doing as good as we think we should be doing. It's not like our business just literally halted. Like we put plans in place to prevent that. It's not like, it was complete standstill. It was just you and I think our expectations for growth and what we want to do are so much higher than, I would say like the average person probably running a business or something like that. So you and I are just constantly like more, whether it's right or wrong. I mean, you could argue that all day, but we seek fulfillment out of that. And I think you have to kind of bring it back to a level head and say like, no, it's okay. We have to remind ourselves like, hey, look, it's okay. This happens. It's going to slow down if you do take time. I don't want to ever get to a situation where we can't truly take like a vacation or something like that. We both have families. And so it's just, the constant balancing act of running a business of you always feel guilty if you take time away, but then you always feel guilty if you work too much, and you have to like
balance that.
It takes a certain level of maturity to balance that. And really
our thing too is we've talked about this on the past couple of podcasts, but like with new content creation for us and marketing, like we really haven't done marketing until this point. The past 2 years of our business and doing accounting with content creators, it's been word of mouth referrals. And then we have a few other people in the scene. Shout out XBLA in the chat is one of them. We're constantly working with other people, but we're not actually actively marketing. We're not talking. We're not cold calling. We're not reaching out to people that we don't know. We're not putting out ads, and we weren't really creating content up until about a month ago. So I think that's where we can still improve a ton, and we are, and that's the goal. But yeah, it's definitely been like a little bit of a wake up call for that for sure. And shout out to J-Man in the chat. J-Man's coming on with us full time here soon, so new full time employee. We're super excited to have him at Game On. And so yeah.
Speaking of taking time off, he's about to take a little bit of time off before coming back and hitting the
graduating college, man. Congrats to him. Graduating college, his undergrad. He's about to finish school this week, which is super exciting. But yeah, I guess we can jump into the topic for the day. This is going to be like, we're winging this one a little bit. We usually have a little bit more standardized topics and like structured, but this is going to be just kind of winging it and talking about kind of our views on this. And there's a couple other things we'll probably get to at the end. A few tweets I saw this week that I wanted to talk about. So you have the title as content creation with an unlimited budget. What does that mean? And furthermore, I'll ask you this. If you were starting content creation as an individual, you were going to make it a business, right? Whether you were live streaming, YouTube, whatever. If you were going to start content creation business in 2023 right now and money was no object to you, what are some of the things that you would stress on, and what are some of the things that you would definitely implement on the front end?
Yeah. And a little background, the reasoning behind the topic is like we get asked questions all the time. And most of the time people look at us and they ask tax questions and they're thinking like, their mind, we advertise as tax accountants, so they're asking that, and we talk about bookkeeping and stuff like that. But we see it so much with content creators themselves and how to run an effective business, not how to make better content necessarily, but just how to run a business. Like there are certain things that every business owner needs to do, and it doesn't mean they always do it. And you can obviously kind of skirt certain things and all that. But I wanted to talk about, if I had an unlimited budget, how would that differ? Like if I'm coming into this, I'm just trying to get into the scene and get into the space, and I want to create content now, and budget is not an issue, because a lot of times it is, and I understand that. But let's flip it real quick and see, how would it change if I had an unlimited budget? I think that,
and what those things you should prioritize, even when now we do limit the money. Okay, what's kind of number one on the list?
Yeah, because if you have unlimited budget and there's like, okay, we have 10 things we want to do, and then we say, okay, let's limit the budget. What would we cut first? We would probably cut number 10, 9, 8. But I think in reality, what people do is when they come in and they do have a limited budget, they spend on what's fun and what's sexy right out the gate, rather than what would actually propel them forward. Mm-hmm. And ironically, that hurts because, those first couple months or years even of income, when you're kind of spending all you got, you should probably prioritize these other things first rather than so. Anyway, we'll get into it, but I think if you take an unlimited budget and you take those top 10 things, and I don't know that it's exactly 10, but if you take those things and look at it, how would I prioritize it with unlimited budget? You can actually back into doing it with a limited budget.
And how refreshing is it too? We're going to get into them, but how refreshing is it when we have creators come to us on the front end and they're doing it right, and not saying we're number one priority. John Laster in the chat, he's probably number one priority, an attorney, which we're going to talk about in a sec, but I mean, it's so refreshing when we get people that they're just getting their stuff going and they're seeking out help from professionals on the front end, not, years and years later when it's like, hey, I've screwed up. You know, I haven't filed tax returns. I don't have this stuff set up properly. I don't have contracts in place. You know, I'm operating in multiple states. Maybe there's sales tax that we haven't been filing, like all of these types of things. So,
yeah. So we'll start there. We'll start with compliance. And all compliance means is just making sure you're taking care of the necessities that you have to do in order to keep like the federal government happy, or, you know, the state Department of Revenue, state Department of Labor, stuff like that. So
I thought compliance was like making sure we don't go to jail.
Well, in some ways it is, but the first thing I would probably recommend based on compliance, I hope you're checking chat because I'm about to kind of rant here, but the first thing with keeping compliant and just doing kind of the ugly work behind the scenes just to make sure like we keep our bases covered. I mean, you mentioned John Laster. So it doesn't have to be John Laster. It could be any attorney, but with an unlimited budget, I'm going to pay an attorney to help me create the LLC. Now, we've talked a bunch of times about how an LLC is not required or anything like that. A lot of times that's to save money, but in all honesty, if we're paying an attorney, this is probably the cheapest thing you can pay an attorney to do, right? Is to set up some kind of small, just register with the state, get the LLC in place.
Somewhat of a structure.
And
what are we doing and why are we doing it, right? Maybe it isn't just a regular S corporation. Maybe it's a partnership. There's going to be reasons behind this. As a new business owner, you're not going to know. That's why you seek out the help.
Yeah. So I would contact an attorney. It's going to cost probably a couple $100 when you factor in the registration fee and all that. Now, if you live in a state like California, the registration fee is going to be a little bit higher. Several $100s. When you factor in, you're paying the attorney and the registration fee to the state itself. That's something you're going to pay every year to renew. Most of the time, I mean, here in Georgia, you're talking like $50 to renew every year. So unlimited budget, I'm already spending $50 every year out the gate, plus a little upfront cost. That's the first thing I would do. It is so easy and simple. Most attorneys, and let me stop right here and say, don't use LegalZoom, don't use anything like that. Just pay an attorney. This is a great opportunity. This is the first entry point to work with an attorney in the space like John Laster is, but there are a couple of them. John is one we use a lot. This is a great point to get in there and make contact with an attorney. And that could be a lasting relationship that's going to help with some of the other things we may talk about here in a second. So I would go ahead and start that. It's an easy entry fee to just get on their radar, right? And so that's a start. Once I do that, I'm immediately shifting to business bank account and setting up books and records, because as unsexy as that is, and when I say books and records, I mean bookkeeping. So I'm going to, unlimited budget here, I'm going to pay for QuickBooks, and I'm going to get a bank account. Now,
this is whether you're actually paying an accountant to do it or not. A lot of the services we provide, which is kind of what you're going into now, clients can do themselves. Like if you're setting up your business from scratch and you don't have that much activity, right? You're just buying a few things for your content creation, you know, supplies, equipment, small stuff like that. Maybe some subscriptions. Maybe you're buying whatever. And then maybe you're getting paid from one or two outlets. Like this is easy to do. This is something you can 100% do on your own, or obviously seeking out professional help like accountants like ourselves. But this is something you could do on your own.
Yeah. And so I'm going to pay for QuickBooks and get the business bank account. The reason I lump those two together is once we get the business bank account, we actually transfer some money into it to kind of get things rolling here. We're going to link it to QuickBooks. And then that kind of starts basically the synchronization there of like everything that comes through the bank goes straight into QuickBooks. I want to have QuickBooks set up relatively quick because from the beginning, I want everything getting categorized to where it should be. Because what's going to happen is when we get to the end of the year, I'm going to forget what I spent that money on back in, let's say we're doing this in January, right?
Okay, so you've started your entity. Let's say this is January, just to make it round numbers, make it easy, timeline easy. It's January. You've sought out an attorney. You got LLC set up with them, right? They got you set up. They've kind of explained some of this stuff. Now you've sought out an accountant, maybe someone like us, or you've done a QuickBooks file by yourself. You've paid for QuickBooks and you've linked your bank account and all that stuff. Now we're in the February timeline. This whole time you've been making money. So you're starting to transfer your stuff over to the business bank account, all these types of things. What's next on the list? If you have kind of gotten those two things in order, what would you say would be the next expense, bar no budget, you know, you can spend as much as you want, that you're going to spend money on?
Yeah. And I'm really quick. I'm glad you pointed out the accountant part, because we're on unlimited budget. The bank account, I'm going to set up the bank account, but the QuickBooks and all that, I'm going to pay an accountant to do that. Sure. I'm unlimited budget here. I'm paying an
because accountant. Of why? Because of your time.
Because of my time.
You know how
I'm
much time
that time. Yeah.
You know how much time it's going to take and how much your time is worth it with if you could use your time to be creating the content, you want to do that versus spending it
and
on.
I'm fresh out the gate. I don't know what I don't know. So I don't know QuickBooks at all. I'm assuming like true content creator. I'm saying, if I were to start one right now, but I'm starting one knowing nothing. All right. So I have unlimited budget, but I don't know anything about QuickBooks.
Shout out Jamin in the chat, said Herman Miller's. He's saying
Herman Miller's.
his next expense is going to be a Herman Miller.
That's
maybe
the internal
not.
joke, by the way, inside joke there.
I mean, if you have an unlimited budget, maybe the income's there to support
that's
it.
like number 30 on the list. I mean, that's like, we'll get to that, J-Man. But yeah, so to your point, moving on to the next thing, we've got the LLC structure and we've met an attorney. Now we've got our books and we've met an accountant. I'm not saying those, by the way, just to advertise or promote us. John Laster even put in the chat, there are a couple other attorneys. So this isn't a promotional thing. This is literally what I would do at this point, this is what I would do for any business. This has nothing to do with content creation. I would do this for any business right out the gate.
Also, you're not specifically talking about businesses of a certain size. This is something that even if you only make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year doing this, it's not that much money. You should still probably have an LLC set up and have talked to an attorney, and you probably should have some kind of record keeping because you are going to have to report that on taxes. So this isn't something we're saying like, oh, only if you make hundreds of thousands of dollars. No, we're talking about any content creation business, any business in general so far, but any content creator specifically.
Yeah. So number 3, what I'm doing third after we've got the LLC, we've got the business bank account and all that. I don't want to skip past this step. This doesn't cost us anything, but I'm going to make sure that, whatever platform I'm using, Twitch, YouTube, whatever, is now set up to fund the business bank account. So in order to keep things separate, I'm going through all those things. And I don't think this is a small step, because when you factor in, I've got to go in, I've got to log into my Twitch, I've got to log into my YouTube, I've got to log into my TikTok, I've got to log anything that's paying me, and make sure that money is routed to the right place, and also make sure that the business name, the new LLC, is what's getting the money. Because at the end of the year, I'm going to get a 1099, and I don't want it to be in my personal name. Now, it's not the end of the world if it is, but again, we're setting this up from scratch. Let's do it right.
Let's do it right.
Put it in the business name. So I'm going to take my time going through that. It literally will probably take you like an hour to go through all of them, unless you're somebody who's getting paid from 20 different platforms.
Which, if we're starting a new company, most likely you're not.
Exactly. So good point there. So after that, now is probably, I'm trying to think, and correct me if I'm forgetting something here, because I really am kind of doing this off the top of my head.
Yeah, putting you on the spot on this one. So
yeah, but that's okay. At this point, we probably shift. We get away from the ugly stuff and we get to some of the fun stuff, and we're talking about like buying the actual equipment we're going to use, right?
And probably general business operations. So if we're just considering a content creator as a whole, what are they doing? They're creating content. Most likely it's film, could be, different type of content, I guess, but in most cases, film. So we're going to need a camera, right? We're going to need a good camera. And two of the most important things that any content creator watching this would agree on is going to be the video quality and the audio quality. Yeah. Super important, right?
Yeah. And I'll tell you this, let's take one step back here. And I'm going to do this a lot just because it is off the cuff. We have an attorney, we have an accountant. Some people may say, why not a financial planner? And my argument here is, and this, I don't want to upset anybody because there are great financial planners in the space, but to this point, starting a new business, we haven't made money. There's no prospect that we're going to, but what are things we still have to do even if we don't make money? We may still need an attorney, and we may still need an accountant. You don't need a financial planner if you don't have the money, right? The only thing that they could do is possibly help you cut expenses, which is very valuable. But at this point, we'll just assume we're going to be somewhat successful. We'll get a financial planner in the future. That is not one of the first things.
Sure. That's down the road a little bit.
I would go attorney and accountant. I would hold off on the financial planner at this point in time. So I just want to make that delineation, because I don't want, I think people would probably say like, oh, I think a lot of times people think like kind of your big 3, you have an attorney, accountant, and a financial planner. In this case, we're going to leave out the third one just for now.
Right. Because it's not crucial to starting a new business.
Not crucial to start.
So yeah, I think the next key piece is probably going to be on that equipment, right? In order to create the content, what do you need? Well, most people already probably have some kind of computer that they're working on. If you don't, I would say that's a really good investment on the front end. It's obviously going to be a write-off, and it's going to be something that's huge. You're going to use it every single day. So equipment's important. I mean, you can get cameras and audio, mics and audio equipment and stuff really for not that much. If we're talking about making this a business, you can't look at a $1,000 expense as something that's going to break you. It might be necessary on the front end. Now, you do have to obviously consider what your budget is. But if we're going out on a limb and saying there's no budget and we have all the money in the world, we're gonna spend some money on the audio and the video for sure.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, and not to cut you off.
You're good.
When you're starting out, because we see this truly, this not shameless plug here, but we see this with our clients, and they, we run into the same issue of that, in that they don't have expenses. Even some of these high tier that are making a ton of money, that they aren't spending any, because when you buy a computer, and you don't need another one and even if you bought a stream PC and it was just as decked out, which it doesn't even need to be, it's so overkill. But look around this room we're in now, that we have more than we could possibly need. How much are we spending? Like, what we said unlimited budget, but what does this even look like? For the LLC, we're talking a couple $100. For the bank account and QuickBooks is $50 a month. Now we're in step 3. Are we spending 10 grand or are we spending 20?
Yeah, I mean, with an unlimited budget, I think you could spend upwards of tens of thousands. However,
at some point, what would you buy? Like, I don't even know.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about from a content creator who's making no money on the front end, it is hard to consider putting $10,000 into a business that you have no return on yet, or even planning on that return. But that being said, if you have an unlimited budget, I mean, you can get a very nice camera for in the $500 to $1,000 range. Yeah. Same with a good mic, right? You don't need that much. We're talking about a few $100s. Equipment in total with a very nice PC. I mean, you can get a very nice PC for a few $1,000s. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say $5K in equipment is roundabout would be plenty. Now you can spend more for sure. You need more? I don't think so. If we're talking about unlimited budget, yeah, you could. But I wouldn't say that's going to be where it eats you up is equipment. I would say get good stuff. Don't go crazy. Where I would say to transfer us to the next one a little bit is in marketing and branding yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Pay somebody to develop. Maybe it is a Discord. Maybe it is a logo for you, right? Maybe it is a website even. It could be, depending on the type of content that you're creating, to give yourself a brand. Part of building this thing up, just as we're doing here with Game On, is building a brand. That takes a little bit of investment, and no one really wants to spend that on the front end. They want to try to do it themselves. But what have we learned, right? We've learned that it's so much better sometimes to just go and pay somebody who's an expert in their field, whether that's a graphic designer who's really good at logos and they're really good at, making websites, or it could be an editor that's working on, some of your content creation. I think outsourcing on the front end is super, super important. And what the addition to that too is you're going to meet people, right? And you're going to start to network with who's a good editor, who's a bad editor, who's a good graphic designer. And you're going to start to meet people, which you can't really pay for that, but you can start to work with people that is going to grow your network, which is huge when you're starting a business.
Yeah, let's stay here for a minute and kind of sit in this topic, because I think this is going to be crucial and probably where we'll spend our time. Up to this point, we've spent what we've needed to spend just to literally create the content.
Like, to get going.
We cannot make the content unless we have a camera of some sort. That could be on our phone if we really want to, but unlimited budget, we buy a nice camera. So we've got everything we need. We have the physical items needed to create the content. We've got our attorney and our accountant, which could be viewed as outsourcing. Mm-hmm. Now you're talking about outsourcing to other folks, and you listed off a couple of them. Tell me this, who would you pay first? Would you pay, and let's assume we're live streaming, but we're also producing YouTube content. Keep it super simple here. So we're driving traffic from YouTube to our live streams, and you can make shorts on TikTok and all that, but we're going to try and keep it simple here. So would you pay an editor first? Are you going to pay maybe a thumbnail artist, so a graphic designer of some sort? Are you going to pay, and we're going to continue paying our accountant and all that already. So not like those titles, but who are you paying first that's actually going to help our content and help grow our business?
Yeah, I mean,
I only gave you 2 to work with. I'm sorry, but I'm trusting you'll come up with something here.
Yeah.
Who would you say we should pay?
Yeah, no, I think it starts with editor, and that could be thumbnail or actual editing the videos that you're creating, the video that you're putting out. I think those kind of fall into the same bucket. I think that's super important. I think unless you just have a background in editing, you shouldn't be trying to do that yourself.
How long does that take?
To learn?
Like to learn and just to do it. I mean, every day,
it's not my cup of tea, so it probably take me a long time. Yeah. I would just say from experience of talking to creators that do it themselves, they would be so much better off just outsourcing it, and they're afraid to spend the money because they feel like they're giving up part of their business. But we've seen essentially these media companies that have grown from one creator, where they were doing it all themselves, to now they have a staff of 10 or 20 employees that help them, and it is a large essentially media company, and they're truly able to scale by doing that. And so on the front end, it is developing those relationships with an editor, with somebody who can basically take that content that you make, because you're good at making the content and being entertaining, right, or educational, whatever your content style is, and let you do that. Do what you're good at, right? Create the content, let them edit it, let them put it out.
Yeah. Let's pivot for a second, because this is a very interesting topic, and it's related to this obviously, but Rob, and I can't remember the full Twitter handle or anything like that. I've followed him for some time now, but Rob tweeted out the other day, and I know I'm not giving you much to go off, a guy named Rob. He basically said, if you have time to sit there and stream or whatever, you have time to edit. Or he basically said it though in a, I don't know, more condescending fashion, and he got a lot of pushback for it. In my opinion, he was absolutely right, and I think people took offense to it. But he was basically saying, like, it's not worth it to sit there and stream 8 hours a day. Like, you should spend half, maybe even more, literally editing and doing all that, and maybe 2 hours streaming. Unlimited budget here, we can hire an editor. How much value do we unlock now? How much leverage do we get from the fact that now we can stream 8 hours and get all that gameplay footage and just pay somebody the other, let's say we were doing 6 and 2 split there, 6 editing, 2 recording, or 2 streaming. Now we can do the full 8 streaming, and on the back, behind us, there's somebody else editing for the other 8. Like, I mean, we've just unlocked so much potential there.
Yeah, and what do we always talk about when we get on this topic of business, content creation as a business, is time, right? And that's what all this is. All we're talking about right now is being able to outsource it, is you're buying yourself time. You might think you're buying yourself edits, you're buying yourself time, because now you don't have to do it. And so, like you said, maybe that time is spent creating more content. Maybe it's time spent meeting with your attorney and your accountant. There's other parts of running your business besides just creating the content. And by paying these people to do that and delegate these other tasks to them and outsourcing them, you buy yourself time to do those other things. Some of our smaller creators that we work with, it can be very hard to get them on the phone and get meetings set with them. And it's because they're doing everything themselves, right? They're
just too busy.
Heaven forbid they have to travel a little bit, or they have something come up personally. We're not talking to them because we're so low on their priority list, because they're focusing on what? Creating the content and then editing it and doing it all themselves. So I think what you have to shift your mind to as a small creator, or even a larger creator, is how can I maximize my time? And that's ultimately what business a lot of the time is about.
That's every day.
And you
every day.
And you do that by not just by good time management, but by delegating things that it doesn't need you to do. And then that way, to your point, when you are streaming, somebody's creating content on the back end that's putting it out, and that's going to end up being money in your pocket.
Yeah. John brings up a good point too. He says, in my opinion, anything that has discoverability is more impactful. And I'm going to stop right there and take the quote out of context here. But at the beginning, we talked about, the first thing we're going to try and do is get compliant. So we've got compliance. We checked it off. That was our attorney and our accountant. Those are gone. We know we're safe. We're good. We're not going to jail like you talked about. So we're trying to stay out of jail. Second, discoverability. That's our focus. And discoverability, we bought the equipment, we've hired an editor, and we're focusing on, YouTube, whatever. And John mentions later on going to, providing shorts and all that. I agree. Whether you do shorts, long form, I think we've seen success in a lot of different fashions from the creators that we work with. I think they would probably even argue amongst themselves which direction to take, and that's why we're not spending much time doing it, is because that's not our forte. But I would say I do agree with discoverability. So we've got compliance, discoverability, and then after that, maybe we focus on, streaming, provided we still have time. We're looking at like actually streaming. Maybe that's one to many, but I would say maybe even one-to-one services where we're like helping somebody else set up, doing consulting work or something like that. So, but prioritizing discoverability over everything right now.
Yeah, I think that's where the branding part, all this part we're talking about is, in the branding is, discoverability, but also paying people to be able to find you. And when they do find you, giving them a reason to follow or enjoy your content. I think there's a lot of creators out there that, I see them on Twitch all the time, but they're streaming a ton of hours and they are good and they're entertaining, but they just don't have the viewership and they don't have the popularity as some bigger ones. And it's because they stream all the time and they're not spending any time or money on growing their platform to where people can find them. And I wonder sometimes, man, just if people could just see this creator, they're so good, they're so entertaining and stuff, but they're going to have to spend a little bit more time working on that. I want to ask one thing as we kind of move to maybe some of the next few is, what would you value and where would it fit in for maybe some type of manager, like a brand manager? It could be a content manager, or it could even be an agent. Where would you see that fitting in for a new content creation business, and what does that value add?
Yeah, this is a good topic, and I'm going to say it falls somewhere in the line of the financial advisors. Now, like, as we've gotten this started and everything, let's just assume some level of success has happened, and if we focus on discoverability here's where this ties in too, is like, if we focused on discoverability, overall our concurrent viewership and everything else is going up. Whereas if we just live stream, maybe that's not happening. It'll happen, but slowly, versus we're trying to be discoverable. If we've done that correctly and we have some level of success, now we want to start looking at bringing in an agent, because we have an unlimited budget. I'm not going to go out and find these brand deals. I don't have time, right? We go back to that. We're trading basically a lot of money to save ourselves time. I'm going to go get an agent of some sort. Now, it's very possible we could have lined this up with step one, in that some agents and agencies, the people who got us the LLC to start with could also be the same attorney we use as an agent or whatever. It doesn't that's not a one-to-one all the time. So I wouldn't say like focus and prioritize that, but yeah, I mean, we're going to look for an agent pretty soon. And again, some level of success at this point, we may be looking at financial advisor too. So we've kind of circled back now. We got our compliance and we got our professionals in place, and we went to equipment, and then we went to, accounting, bookkeeping, all that stuff. We got all that done. Moved to equipment, moved to hiring editors and stuff that's going to grow our business. Now we're going to we're expanding, contract, expanding, contract. And we're going to contract again, and we're going to start hiring more different professionals, not an editor, not somebody who's going to grow our viewership necessarily, but somebody who's going to help us drive revenue.
Actually start building up some strategy of how we're going to do this thing.
Or help us cut cost and budget, which could be the financial planner. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the trade-off we're going to make there, in that, these people aren't going to drive viewership necessarily, but they are going to drive our revenue with brand deals, sponsorships, whatnot.
And I think it's important to say this too, is this isn't always just going to be a perfect path, right? At some point, through working with different editors or outsourcing some of these things, you might meet a really good financial planner. You might meet a really good content manager, somebody who's maybe created content in the past, and now they understand the algorithm, and they know how to work on the algorithm and when to post and do all these things, and they can help you a lot. You might find a really good agency that you want to work with, and you get connected with somebody there. These things naturally are going to happen if you are doing these other things we talked about first and growing correctly. Now, obviously, there's worlds in which it does not happen like this. We see content creators all the time that get into this industry from all kinds of different ways. We have a creator, a very large and fast growing creator, that quit her job this year because she was just doing it on the side part-time, and it grew up and is making more money than her, W-2 job. So we understand that this isn't how most of the time it happens. We're saying if we were starting this is how we would go about it. And obviously we're presuming some sort of success is coming of it.
Yeah. So we've spent all this money now. And honestly, I mean, what else is there? So at this point, let's just take a step back and say, like, okay, we've spent all this money. We're doing all this. What else is left? Because honestly, at this point, I think this is a good time to shift to intangibles and talk about, none of this happens unless you just create good content. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you could spend all this money and everything and pay all these people, but is your accountant going to drive revenue for you? No. I mean, are they going to drive viewership? No. Is your attorney? No. They can make good connections for you and help you network. Absolutely, 100%. That's definitely a reason maybe you want to look at hiring them. But even your agent, and John pointed out also, I don't want to skip over this. John said most lawyers can negotiate your team agency deals for you. That's 100% true. So, like, going back to what I said, if whoever set the LLC up for you, if you use somebody who's like in the space, John, Noah, all the people he listed earlier, that's a benefit of having somebody in the space, is they can oftentimes negotiate that for you. But now, even that person negotiating those deals, they can't do it if you don't have concurrent viewers, because they have nothing to give to offer a brand. And so
where's the value?
Yeah. And we have somebody weeding and cutting grass outside, which is hilarious. So
maybe the mic's not picking it up.
Maybe the mic doesn't pick that up. But yeah, I mean, let's pivot to that now and talk about like how none of this really matters if you don't make good content. Like, ultimately, it's on you to produce and make great content to drive all of this. That's what's driving the ship. And so at the end of the day, even though all these people are helping you, you bought all this equipment, it's your business. It is your business. It's not, up to somebody else to drive all these things for you. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, what do we see on Twitter all the time about some of the larger creators that we follow that are always talking about, I don't know why you sitting on Twitch all day just expecting an audience like that. Like, why do you expect people to watch you just because you think you deserve an audience because you stream all day long? It's like, that's not how it works. Like, creating good quality content is rewarded. And, I'll listen to Mr. B's stuff a lot, and he was talking on a podcast about how the algorithm works. And he says, yes, there's a system behind it, but at the same time, the algorithm is rewarding good quality videos. And why? It's because people are watching them because they're good quality. And so when more people watch them, it gets boosted. And so I think that's what a lot of the time it goes back to. And yeah, I know we're just sitting over here saying, well, just create better content. But the reality of it is, I think too many people focus on time in, and I got to stream all the time and I got to do all this, instead of taking a step back and like actually assessing, and maybe having people on their team that they work with, like we said, a manager or somebody that can say, what do you, how is the content doing? What is, and getting advice from people and seeing what trends are in the industry. What should I be working on? Maybe it's shorts, right? Short form content over the last 3 years has blown up. If you were just head down streaming all day long, never creating shorts or realizing it, you might be late to the party when you could have grown off of something like that.
Absolutely. And how many times now have we, like, based on networking and just being in the scene, that's another thing is like, talk about an intangible, is like, you got to give it time. I mean, right away when you start and you have no viewership and all that, it's about more than just like you go live every day. You're trying to do all these other things, but also like reach out and get to know people, because we haven't run into anybody yet, especially, we're new to our content journey. We're doing this podcast, which we're on number 8 now, by the way. So congratulations, that's 8 straight weeks. How many people have told us like, no, I'm not willing to help? Like everybody we've talked to has been so helpful, and they've guided our decisions, and they've been so kind about it. And you just don't get that unless you're just in the space and doing all these things over and over for years. Yep. This comes back to the statistic, most small businesses don't make money until somewhere between years 3 and 5. And you shouldn't expect it to be any different for you. The example you referred to earlier, I thought was awesome, because we were talking about one of our creators, and obviously we're not going to drop any names, but she was able to do that. She kind of did have an unlimited budget, didn't she? Because she had another source of income that was funding it. And she started it part-time. She built those relationships on the side at first with an unlimited budget. And you may say, that's nice. I wish I could do that. But like, she was still working a full-time job. She was putting in crazy hours, because then she was, streaming, creating shorts, all these things. She was working like crazy for that. And so it wasn't, if you said must be nice to her, she'd probably get offended. Yeah. And for good reason, she's a good case study, because we're talking about an unlimited budget. She had one. Yeah. But
obviously unlimited is a harsh word or strong word, but yeah, I mean, from the fact of she had money to invest in her stream and in her content. I want to touch on something you said right there, which is super important, which is going to segue us into probably the last part of the podcast, which is networking. And with her specifically is a great example of this. And you noted on it there is she was in the scene and she was, getting involved with people and meeting people. Networking, man. I saw a tweet this week and I quote tweeted it, and it was,
I wish J-Man were here to pull the tweet up.
It was a small streamer or a small creator, and they posted a question to their audience on Twitter saying, do you guys think networking in the streaming community, and they were specifically talking about streaming, however, I viewed it more as just content creation as a whole, do you view that networking in the streaming industry is important or necessary or something like this? And a lot of the responses, surprisingly, were no. They didn't believe in it. They didn't think it mattered. They thought a lot of it, they were really reading into it as, I mean, yeah, kind of like J-Man just said, like the word networking, like, what does that mean? That sounds super white collar, businessy, like almost like leeching off of other people, right? Yeah. And I just want to give a perspective from us being professionals in the industry, working with content creators all the time. Our most successful creators have networked their way into this scene and work with some of the other largest creators in the scene. It is not by happenstance that you see 2 large creators collabing. It's not by happenstance you see 2, 3, 4 larger creators retweeting each other's things and communicating together. And that's what networking is. It's growing together, and it's not using people. It's basically, it's just connecting with others and benefiting them where you can and supporting them because you see that they're doing good stuff. I know for us getting into this industry, not being here this long, people just like John, who's in the chat, have helped us and just networking with them. And it's been a huge part of our growth of just not necessarily them sending us clients, but just learning the industry, learning how things work. It's been huge. And so to tie this all back to that creator that you were just talking about, a large part of her growth was connecting with bigger content creators. And what did it do for her? It was huge for her. It grew her a ton, but it was because she took the step to reach out to them and network with them and be interactive on Twitter with them. And I mean, I would attribute a lot of her success to that. Yeah. I don't know what your thoughts are on networking in general, but I can definitely speak to it being very important.
I'll speak to it and say that, because you hit the nail on the head, I don't think we need to beat a dead horse. You're exactly right. I think it is super important. It's obviously helped our work. We had the benefit of having, truly a service-based business behind any content we produce. If we're just producing content and that's it, I could understand why people would say, like, keep your head down, just edit. I get that. But networking is still going to provide value there. I don't think you can sacrifice the relationship part of it. I think a lot of your growth is locked behind maybe one or two other creators giving you a big shout out, vouching for you, saying this is a good person. And I think the best way to get that, to kind of caveat on what you're saying, because John mentioned it sounds salesy, and I understand that. I get it. When people say networking and all that, I think the knee-jerk reaction on Twitter was because people immediately think, oh, that's salesy.
Or a networking event or something that's businessy, that's like going to be, oh, we just need to go and give me money,
I think the best form of networking is literally giving something of value, even if it's really small, and expecting nothing in return to somebody who may not even be able to help you. You could give somebody the value of making their day by literally going in their chat and not putting your emoji in their chat or anything like that. Like, that is so scummy. Like, instead, you could go in for 5 seconds and say, like, hey, man, love the channel. I love the content you're producing. Keep it up. It could be a YouTube comment. It could be anything like that.
Just truly supporting people that you like and
Twitter
enjoy.
Is a great place for it. Like, showing support there, 100%. I think by doing that, that is networking. To me, that is networking. I have DM people, because you mentioned we haven't done a ton of marketing. I've DM people and said, hey, look, I love your content. If we can ever be of service in the future, just let me know. And I didn't hear back for 6 months, a year. I didn't hear anything back. It was whatever. And I didn't do this a ton. But funny enough, some of the people that I did do it for, they came back. And it was maybe a year later. It was after they got the social proof of seeing like other people were working with us and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And that's what it takes. But to me, that's networking. I put myself out there and just said, like, hey, I love your content. I complimented them, said, because that was genuine. I really do. And I said, if we can ever be of service, let me know. I didn't ask them to do anything. Right. I was just saying, if we can help you, let me know. I think that's networking. I think when we go to TwitchCon this year, we're not going around saying, handing out business cards saying, hey,
we're accountants, come use us. No, it's going to be, we want to go there to support people that we watch and meet people and just say, hey, what's going on?
And all the people that we watch and everything are going to do the networking for us. They're going to say, oh, you don't know that, like, you need to use them. Right. Well, anytime somebody says, like, I need an accountant, I want everybody else in the space to say, like, oh, you got to use these guys. Like, this is this team.
And not because we just want to be on the top or anything like that, but because we hope that we provide that amount of value to where people will say that. And that goes back to what John said in the chat as well, is just adding value before you ask for anything. Like, what can you do to help others and not expect anything in return, and it will always come back to you. Yeah. So, I don't know. I don't want to harp on that too much, but I do think that's important. And I think people do view it the wrong way. It's not going in streamers chat while you're live and telling them to go to your chat. It's not what it is. And you will piss people off if you do that.
That's a negative effect. That's gonna drive people away from you.
For sure. But as we're wrapping this up, because we do have to cut this one a little bit short today. We have meetings coming up. We're running short on time. So we've talked about compliance. We've talked about kind of the necessaries to start, some equipment stuff. We've talked about outsourcing and who you might have to pay to do that. And then we've talked a little bit about the intangibles, things like branding, networking, and maybe how to actually make better content. Is there anything else that you would say kind of applies to this as content creation as a business? The only thing I'll kind of say before you go is consistency.
I was about to say, you took mine. Now I can't say that one.
Well,
so you're going to end it here
consistency
too.
over time and just a schedule. I think it's so important. We tell creators all the time, like, man, I would love to watch you more. I don't know when you're going to be live. I don't know when your videos are going to come out. Like, I think being consistent and just having a set schedule, especially for live streamers, is so important.
Absolutely. I agree. Consistency over everything. I mean, now that you've done it, you've got the setup. It's really just maintaining that and letting people know when you're going to be live, when you're producing content. And, you know, if you do that for long enough, the score takes care of itself, right? Over time, you'll end up in a much better place. I don't know where. That's the thing. That's the beauty in content creation is like, yeah, it'll be different for everybody, but you'll end up higher up, better than you were when you started if you do those things in that order. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I don't think it's that hard. I think, you know, we were able to talk about it in 30, 40 minutes. And honestly, all those things we talked about, they take about 30, 45 minutes probably each to kind of set up and get going. And, you know, at the end of the day, it comes back to you, what you do, what content you make, and how consistent you can stay.
And to be honest, you know, we frame this around unlimited budget and money and all that. It doesn't take that much money either. You know, we have creators that are making multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars on $20,000 to $30,000 of expenses. I mean, margins are very high in this industry, which is awesome because people are paying you for your time. They're paying for your face on the camera. They're paying for your time editing or creating the content for YouTube. They're paying for your time, and therefore you can't expense your time. So you're going to have high margins. It doesn't take that much to get into this. It does not take that much to seek out that attorney and get stuff set up correctly, to find a good editor and start working with somebody that you can pay consistently, to find a good agent. I mean, these things can take time, but they just don't cost that much. So I hope we've been helpful. I know we kind of rambled a little bit on some of these topics, but I hope this has provided some kind of value. We appreciate the chatters. John, appreciate all the info you're putting in chat. Consistently be consistent. Love that. I try to live by that, to be honest. So yeah, I don't know, Garrett, you have anything else to add before we hop off of here? But
no, you can find us on YouTube, same place, YouTube, Twitter, all of that. Obviously, you know, we love the interaction, everything, any comments, any likes, subscribes. We certainly appreciate it. This podcast will be on YouTube as soon as we can download the VOD and then, you know, upload it and everything like that.
Like and subscribe, share it if you learn anything. We appreciate it. We're trying to grow, trying to be consistent. So.
Absolutely. Consistently consistent.
That's right.
But no, outside of that, that's where to find us. I think everybody at this point kind of knows that, but we'll continue to preach it and continue to keep growing our brand. We're going to try and practice what we preach and do everything we keep saying other people should do. So
definitely.
No, I appreciate everybody being here. We're running on 50 minutes now. So let's hop on our other call and call today.
See you guys next time.
See you next time.